I want to start things off by saying that Tower of God isn't a bad anime. I actually enjoyed it, and some elements of the show were quite strong in ways I wasn't expecting based on my first impressions. As an ensemble piece similar to the style of My Hero, it worked well. By the end, I bought into the group caring for each other more than I thought I ever really would, and there's credit to be given there, especially with how heavily that plays into the final twist of the season. But it has to be said, leaning so heavily into that dynamic also hurts the anime. The close-knit, almost school anime-like sections took something away from the early tests that it just never got back, and although it came out as an entertaining anime still, I think it could have been much better. It almost feels like two separate anime ideas, with one abandoned to realize the second. It lost a sense of urgency and importance it had early on that, if kept, could have made it a great anime rather than just a good one. To really get into this, let's remember the first couple tests of the tower. We started off with the steel ball, and that was a great introduction. It was intimate and dangerous, and if you failed, it took your life away. That was the penalty. It showed just how unforgiving the tower would be. And then after that, you're dropped into a culling, where you have to take the number of people just like you down from 400 to 200 with your own hands. It stops being just about being killed, but also having to kill. It really is kill or be killed, so you better start killing. Then things slowed down a bit. The Shinsei wall wasn't anything spectacular, but it did show off the air of luck needed to make it to the top, since the strongest person could have been left behind due to a weak teammate. Even if they were good enough, their simple physical position from the last test could have screwed them. And the door test was really just an excuse to kick off the corruption subplot and strengthen Kun's character, but it was a bastard of a test. Pick wrong and you still die, even if every choice could be right. Then the crown game, where everyone comes together for the first time since the culling, and they have the chance to kill each other once again. They don't, since teams can escape back to their cells, but we see it's possible and would have happened had Bomb not unleashed his Shinsu so abruptly. Although they weren't all equally as urgent and showed a clear ramp down in that respect, they all still had some threat and danger to them, especially in a hostile environment way. But then we get to the position selection, and we have to be honest, things just don't matter as much anymore. I enjoyed the group dynamic they developed. Not every character in it had flaws, but it worked. But we have to admit that something was lost in this transition. But this is the point where it stops being this long, arduous, and deadly quest to have your wish granted, and becomes a bit of a miniature My Hero season. I really wasn't expecting this school section complete with literal classes, and it's a bit of narrative whiplash in that sense. Enjoyable still, but do computer classes really hold the same weight as a forced culling of people just like you? It was hard for me to see these sections as a continuation of what came before them. Not just from the tonal shift, but also the setting and technology. At first it was mystical, and they were just people with weapons fighting each other. Then we start to see more interiors, and it's less primitive but still feels temporary and cold. Then they're having fun in a cafeteria, hanging out in their rooms with comfy beds, and going to separate classrooms to learn. It really doesn't feel like the same anime at that point. But back to the sense of danger. Where before, if they failed, it cost them their life, now if they fail, they just get to go home? Why didn't that go the other way around? They fight each other in some tests, but they're set up so that they can't die. And by the time of the tag game, they're all too friendly to kill each other, except for Ho, and that was a setup anyway. I wasn't invested in seeing who won and who lost because there wasn't as much at stake anymore. And this is shown perfectly by Serena. I actually really liked her character. I think it's a smart move to have clearly weaker yet still realistic and somewhat determined characters in the crew. It doesn't anime no good to have everyone on the same level because then nothing's special. But for what she does bring to it, she brings something worse. And that's the definitive removal of any sense of real danger. One of the mistakes with her character that does this is showing her life before the tower. Yes, it's somewhat tragic. She has nothing, and all of her companions die just before she enters the tower. It's not a good life by any means. But showing this normalizes the world outside too much. Where before we could never be sure of what lies beyond climbing the tower, seeing only Bomb and Rachel trapped in a cave, now we know there's ports and trading and basically some semblance of life as we know it. It removes the mystery of this world and adds the idea of mundane reasons why they might be climbing, rather than the question mark there was before. And even if they didn't die when they failed, we still couldn't assume life was worth living elsewhere. We've only seen people in caves before this. Even if Serena's wasn't, it shows that there were others that could be. Plus, what amps this up to 11 is that she's simply able to leave. She packs up, walks away, and that's it. We can't say for sure that those who do this aren't killed, but we see nothing to say they are either. And if she was killed, they probably would have shown us so to develop the tower as even more corrupt. But there's no consequence that we see. This moment is similar to what Mother's basement said about SAO. Once Yui is there with her admin powers, there's no more danger at all. If anything bad happens, she's able to fix it, and it gives you less reason to care what happens. It's the same here. You failed, but it doesn't really matter. You can just pack up your things and go home. I wouldn't have cared if it started like this or was always like this, but to have this very dangerous concept at first and then that just flops onto its side, it also hurts the idea of corruption that they're pushing every now and often. I mean, if this really was a corrupt tower where none of this really matters, would they really just let you go home? Why ramp things down like this? If anything, it would have been even more engrossing to watch them become friends like they do while still dealing with the hardship and loss of the early tests. Instead of having a character just leave for emotional pull, have them die. Then they all have to move on through the shock and loss. It becomes a vicious cycle, and they sadly get accustomed to death because they have no other option. They have to survive. Then, just when it's normalized, make them fight again. Pit them against each other, and see who has what it takes to have their wish granted by these corrupt men. Who's willing to kill their friends to reach the top. It just seems like a missed chance through and through to have this element be so lightly incorporated, and only really by Rachel, who's not even a part of the friend group anyway. I will say though, as a grain of salt thing, this still could be something that happens in Season 2, but I think it's fair to address this as its singular season and say that this is an issue. Hey, quick plug. So I make tons of other discussion videos, in addition to reviews, impressions, and comedy videos, all focused on the anime you love. Consider subscribing for more in the future, or checking out a few other videos on anything from utter classics to modern hits. Also, I have a Discord server linked in the description for the channel if you want to talk anime with other fans or reach me directly. Anyway, back to the video. Now, they bolster up the idea that the tower is going to be this long quest using a bit of exaggeration, mostly with the floor numbers. Early on, they say floor 30. Later on, it's 77. It's supposed to show that this really is this long kind of dredge of a quest with all these floors. But what we see in the anime, and what anime is limited to, is something very different where it just doesn't work as well. It's impossible to show every floor of such an extensive climb in any anime. Well, except maybe One Piece, but I don't even want to think about that episode count. While I like this idea, we only actually see them climb a few floors, and the admins themselves don't seem very interested in actually having them go through every test. They're given chances to skip the entire tower and go right to the top. Now, I think this might get pulled around on us and used to show that the whole tower is a fraudulent idea and they've been lied to, so this is more of another grain of salt point, but still worth going over. But doesn't it feel cheap that even the people running the show don't care to make it feel like it's really something important? And if it's the opposite, if it doesn't matter and they're just manipulating people, that only 2 of the participants are being manipulated. I mean, I don't really care what these tests are like or if they're going to pass them because they're given the chance to just skip them anyway, to go right to the top. I mean, maybe even if they fail, they might be given the same choice. Kind of being in between the 2 lanes of those 2 possible outcomes is hurting it here. It makes the whole scale feel irrelevant and much smaller than what they want it to feel like. They can say whatever they want about floor 30 or 77 because we'll never see most of them. Again, to compare it to the intro of Kill la Kill, we have no reference that says look how fucked this is gonna be to do, visual or not, like that anime did. We're only told that it should be. But I will say, if this comes around and turns into that idea of corruption, and they were lying, and no one even gets a wish at the top or something like that, then this works because it'll have a finishing point that says, that's why it was like this. But until that happens, especially having it stop on that on, presumably, a seasonal gap, it's a weaker point of the anime. But I want to reiterate, Tower of God isn't a bad anime by any means. When we presumably get Season 2, I'm gonna watch it right away. I mean, as much as I dislike the transition and how it changes from this harsh journey to just kind of school exams, I still enjoyed them both separately. And the twist to have Bomb actually be the normal one rather than the special one, and just the guts to make Rachel a full-on selfish asshole is commendable. I was watching very intently in the final couple episodes because everything was starting to fall into place to really set up for some real change moving forward. And watching a usually comic relief character in Rock being so overtly distraught over Bomb was touching. I genuinely felt for them all in that moment, and it's super refreshing to see actual backing to a fighting for our friends moment. But I think it would have been even stronger had there been a more present danger like the early tests had. But there's so much potential for the presumable Season 2. Mainly with the higher-ups of the tower, what their plan really is, because I could see it coming down to them reaching the top and there being no wish, no prize, and throwing the entire journey on its head, and I have to say, thinking that could happen, I would love that so much. Anyway, if you like this video, let me know down below with a comment, either telling me something you thought on it, if you agree with me, if you disagree with me, if I missed anything like that, leave it down below. And if you did like the video, leave a like with that handy little button they give you, so that I know to make more videos like this or more videos about this, and let me know what other types of videos or topics you'd want to see down there as well. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing to stick around for more anime videos like the ones on screen right now. But anyway, I'll stop rambling, let you get back on with your day, and just say thank you for watching, and I hope I'll see you again soon.